The storm came in thick as soup, the kind of southern summer squall that makes the power give up first. The Brooks house sighed when the lights blinked out, and a single emergency bulb cast a meek amber halo over the upstairs hall. Eli stood in that half-light with his palm hovering above the bathroom doorknob, the skin on his fingers prickling at the chill rising off the tile. Beyond the door, water ran steady and hot, a hiss like an iron on linen. Beneath that hiss lived other sounds, breath that stumbled. A faint click, as if a phone screen tapped awake. A low, almost hidden murmur that might have been a word or might have been the house settling. He thought of the circuit breaker in the garage. Of his toolbox still dusted with sawdust from a kitchen remodel. Of every practical thing a man does when life is simple. But this wasn't about breakers or tools. This was about a door. Scout. The old Labrador with cloudy eyes, and a heart that never quit, pressed his gray muzzle to the gap and sniffed, tail tucked. He let out a low sound, not quite a growl, not fear either. Something in between, the sound of a creature sensing a pattern it can't name. Hibiscus and vanilla leaked under the door. Maya's night scent, lush and sweet and lately too strong, as if she were rinsing it on instead of dabbing it behind her ears. The house held its breath. Rain ticked on the roof. A gutter complained. Thunder stitched itself along the horizon and unstitched again. "Don't," Eli almost said out loud to his own hand. "Don't open it." In his head, the voice was mine. "If I turn that knob, I won't be the same man on the other side." Footsteps, soft as a secret, slid down the hall. Mira stopped at the corner where the light didn't fully reach, a spare silhouette clutching her notebook in both hands. 17 and careful, she'd learned how to be small in a house where adults carried their private weather. Eli tipped his chin to her, a quiet command for silence. She nodded, ponytail damp at the ends from the brief run through rain when the power died and she'd rushed to help move the potted fern from the porch. Somewhere in the neighborhood a generator coughed alive. The hum floated in, a distant, stubborn heartbeat. Eli kept looking at the door. He remembered the day he installed this very knob, the old brass one that caught on Maya's robe swapped for a brushed nickel handle with a soft latch, no lock. He had said then, half joking, half something else. "We don't need locks in this family." He meant trust. He meant ease. He meant a way back in when someone felt alone. The shower's rhythm shifted, rising to a brighter hiss. The phone's light flashed again. A pale square flickered over the floor gap and disappeared. As if a small fish turned its belly to moonlight and darted away. Scout flinched, then pressed closer until one front paw slipped on the tile and thumped the baseboard. The thump drew out a soft change behind the door, a hitch of breath, a pause like a skipped beat in a song, and then the water thundered harder. A cover-up, a curtain. Eli's throat worked around a dryness he couldn't swallow. All of this used to be ordinary. A second shower. Sure. A woman wanting to feel new before bed. Nothing to it. He'd told himself that for months, folding it into the tidy stories men tell so they can sleep. But a story gets heavy if it's working too hard to hold the roof up. The dog knew. The rhythms of the house knew. Maya used to leave the bathroom with damp shoulders and a laugh about the day. Lately she came out smelling like an orchard pretending to be a church. Those hands that once lingered on his shoulder now full of phone. "I'm fine," she'd say, kissing the air near his cheek. "I just needed a minute." Tonight the minute had stretched thin as stretched sugar, glossy and fragile and ready to crack under a fingertip. Mira took a breath to speak and thought better of it. Her eyes said, "I'm here and also I shouldn't be here." Eli felt the sigh of that, an uncle's helpless gratitude wrapped in a father's ache. He had promised her aunt, his sister, he'd keep the girls steady until applications were in and the world had made its first decisions about her. Be steady, he told himself. Be steady now. He touched the knob. The metal was cool and honest. His pulse found it and lifted. On the other side of the door, something small ticked to the tile. Then skittered. A black bead, no bigger than a peppercorn, rolled out through the thin gap, curved once like it had a mind to turn back, and came to rest against the side of Scout's paw. The dog stared down at it, head cocked. Eli crouched, knees complaining the way a 50-year-old man's knees complain, and pinched the bead between thumb and forefinger. It wasn't pretty, dull, old, the kind of seed or charm kids string on cheap cord at summer Bible camp and lose by August. Yet it hummed with a history he couldn't place, an artifact from someone else's story left in his hallway. He raised it to the light. It did not shine, but it did insist, "I came from in there." If you've ever faced a moment when trust felt like it was shattering, hit like and leave a comment. Would you open that door, or walk away? The house popped somewhere, the natural release of wood shifting against storm-soaked air. Eli imagined the vanity drawer where Maya kept a clutter of hair ties and lotion samples and aspirin that expired last winter. He imagined the blue towel she'd favored since North Myrtle, threadbare at the edge but soft in a way that felt like old vows. He imagined against his will a screen lit with something he didn't want to see. The kind of thing that doesn't just live on glass but seeps into the grout. He thought of church meetings where men his age said grace over potlucks and talked about the Braves. And how the word temptation always sounded like it belonged to boys and not to wives with gentle hands and good credit scores. He thought of justice, not the courthouse kind with flags and benches, but the plain kind where you tell the truth in your kitchen and keep your voice from breaking when someone else's does. Thunder rolled again. Closer this time. The shower shut off. The hush that followed rang louder than the water ever had. Scout's ears pricked. Mira's fingers tightened around her notebook as if it could float her if a wave came. Eli slid the bead into his pocket. He straightened and stepped back from the door. 2 quiet steps. As if he were leaving a hospital room to give the nurse space. In the amber halo, his wedding band flashed once. A quick, accidental flare. He felt the weight of it, a small circle that could be a promise or a fence. My father used to say, he thought. And the voice inside used I again. If the measure of a man is what he does when no one's watching, the measure of a marriage is what you do when you hear the other breathing and you don't understand why it hurts. The doorknob turned from the inside a fraction, then stopped. Then turned again with purpose. The door edged open 2 inches. Steam breathed out and touched Eli's face. Hibiscus and vanilla rode the warmth, too much sweetness at once, like a song played half a key too high. He saw an arc of wet on the tile and the barest silhouette, the suggestion of a shoulder. Eli? Maya's voice was careful. The kind you use with skittish animals and the people you love when you're afraid you might not deserve to. He didn't answer. He nodded once, which in a dark hall is the same as a prayer. He could step forward now, push past this softness, and make the question hard and clean. He could hold up the bead and say, "What is this?" like a detective in a show where truth always arrives before the credits. He could, and maybe a younger man would. Instead he put his hand flat on the door and let it rest there like a blessing he wasn't ready to speak. "The power's out," he said, and hated how small the sentence sounded. How it slid off the real thing. "I know," she whispered. Something in her tone, exhaustion braided with shame, a transparency that wasn't quite transparency, moved across his chest like a bruise finding its shape. Scout, loyal to the end, pushed his head gently against the door, then sat, a sentry at a border that no one had meant to draw. Mira stepped back into shadow, as if giving them privacy were a ritual she'd rehearsed. Eli glanced at her, and she dipped her chin. "I'll be down the hall." Rain softened, and in the pause the house remembered itself. The refrigerator clicked in the distance as power flirted with returning. It didn't. Eli kept his palm on the door, feeling the faint tremor of her on the other side, the pulse, not of fear, not quite, but of a person balancing on a fact they haven't said yet. He took his hand away. "Get warm," he said, meaning more than temperature. He turned to Mira. "I'll make sure the breakers are fine." Words doing what they could, shy servants carrying trays too heavy for them. He started down the stairs. The bead rode in his pocket, a slight, forgettable weight that refused to be forgotten. Scout rose and followed, then hesitated, then returned to the bathroom and curled by the frame, choosing his post. Behind Eli, the door eased shut, not with a slam, not with a lie, but with a whisper that promised more night before any morning. He told himself he would not leave the house. He told himself he would not open the door by force. He told himself that dignity and love could occupy the same room if a man gave them chairs. In his chest those chairs scraped and found places. The storm moved east. The house breathed. And Eli, on the stair in that amber light, understood that the door he most feared wasn't made of wood at all. It would open when the words did. And not a heartbeat sooner. By morning, the storm had cleared, but the house still carried the damp quiet storms leave behind. A hush in the curtains, a heaviness in the carpets. Eli sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee cooling between his hands, Scout snoring under the chair. He stared at the bead he had set on the wood grain, small and unremarkable. Yet it held him the way a nail holds a picture frame to plaster. Sunlight came through the window in streaks, catching dust that drifted like tiny witnesses. Maya moved around the kitchen in slippers, hair pulled into a bun that never quite held. She poured herself orange juice, hummed half a hymn, then glanced at the bead and faltered. "What's that?" she asked. Her voice too casual. "Found it in the hall," Eli said. He didn't mention the door, the knob, the steam. He wanted her to offer more, to let truth slip free. But she only nodded as though it were a crumb. Nothing worth picking up. Mira came in with her school bag. Quiet as always. She kissed Maya on the cheek, gave Eli a look that lasted just 1 second too long. He saw it. The look of a girl who knows adults keep secrets but doesn't yet know whether silence is protection or betrayal. After they left Maya to work, Mira to school, Eli drove to Chuck's house. Chuck was on the porch, sipping sweet tea though it wasn't even 9:55, heavyset. His old badge still hung framed in the living room, the kind of man whose eyes never stop scanning. "You look like a man standing outside a burning house," Chuck said before Eli even sat down. Eli told him about the second showers, the locked phone, the bead. Chuck leaned back, chair creaking. "It's not always another man," he said. "Sometimes it's a ghost, and sometimes it's a habit. Either way, you gotta decide if you want answers or peace. Sometimes you can't have both." "I want both," Eli said. Chuck chuckled without humor. "Then you better prepare for pain." Driving home, Eli noticed how familiar the streets were. The diner with its chipped neon, the barber shop with the flag out front, kids tossing a football in the empty lot. Everything ordinary. Yet his own house had turned foreign. That night, Maya made chicken pot pie. The crust golden and breaking just right. She laughed at Mira's story about a teacher, poured Eli his second glass of iced tea, touched his hand lightly as if nothing weighed on her. He wanted to believe her touch, but Scout didn't. The old dog sniffed the air and curled beneath the table, tail thumping uneasily. Later, as Eli brushed his teeth, he heard the second shower begin. Water against tile. Steady as a metronome marking time. He spat, rinsed, stared into the mirror. His reflection looked older, lines deeper. He thought of his father's words again. The measure of a man. He set his jaw and walked into the hall. Mira's door was cracked. She stood in the gap, hair undone, eyes wide. She whispered, "Uncle Eli." "She takes the phone with her every time." He nodded. "Go to bed, Mira." "I saw her delete messages once," the girl said. Her voice shook but carried a steel. Eli hadn't expected. "You need to know." The shower stopped. Silence filled the hall. Eli put a finger to his lips, ushering Mira back. He waited, heart pounding. When Maya emerged, wrapped in her old blue towel, she smiled faintly. "Water pressure's still good after the storm," she said, as if that were news. Eli watched her walk past, the scent of hibiscus filling the air. He almost asked. He almost held out the bead and demanded explanation. Instead, he followed her into the bedroom, lay beside her in the dark, listening to her breathing even out while his own refused to. In the morning, he tried again. "Over breakfast," he said. "You've been up late. Everything all right?" Maya stirred her coffee. "Work's heavy. Deadlines." She offered a smile that never touched her eyes. Mira watched the exchange carefully, as if cataloging evidence. Later that week, a text arrived on Eli's phone from an unknown number. "She's not alone." He froze, staring at it until the screen dimmed. He showed it to Chuck. Chuck squinted. "Could be a prank. Could be more. Either way, don't let paranoia do the work for you. Look for patterns. The truth has a way of showing its face." That night, Eli looked. He noticed the way Maya locked her phone before leaving the room, the way she angled it away from him. He noticed the faint redness in her eyes after showers, as though she had cried or watched something she couldn't explain. He noticed Scout whining at the door, then retreating as though from a line he couldn't cross. Days folded into each other, each carrying the same unease. Eli felt like a carpenter measuring a room he had lived in for decades, only now realizing the walls didn't square. One evening he stood in the yard, staring at the windows lit against dusk. Families in neighboring houses laughed, grills smoked with hamburgers. Kids called to each other. Community life, steady, predictable. But his own windows glowed with mystery. Mira came to stand beside him. "I don't want to make trouble," she said softly. "But I think she's hurting herself." Eli turned sharply. "What do you mean?" Mira bit her lip. "Sometimes I hear sounds. Not like talking to someone. Like she's watching things." Her face flushed with the awkwardness of youth naming the unspeakable. Eli's stomach dropped. He thought of the beat again, of habits, of ghosts. "You shouldn't have to hear that," he told her. She shrugged, eyes old for 17. "You shouldn't either." That night, Eli lingered in the hall longer than he ever had. The shower ran, water hissing. Scout pawed at the door once, whimpered, then backed away. Eli placed his hand flat against the wood, felt the faint vibration of the water. He whispered, "Maya, talk to me." No answer. Just the endless rush of water. He thought of opening the door, of breaking the pattern. But the weight of years pressed him back. Instead, he went to his room, sat on the edge of the bed, and dialed Chuck. "I think she's in trouble," Eli said when Chuck answered. "Not the kind you arrest. The kind you hide from." Chuck's sigh traveled through the line. "Then you need to decide. Are you her jailer, or her partner? You can't be both." Eli didn't sleep. He sat awake, the house dark around him, the bead in his palm, Scout at his feet, waiting for morning. When dawn came, he resolved. No more half questions. It was time to face what lived behind those showers. But for that, he'd need courage, not the kind of fists, but the kind of heart that tells the truth even when it cuts. The text came again 2 nights later. The same number. The same words. "She's not alone." Eli stared at the glowing letters, thumb hovering, his chest tightening as though the words themselves pressed down on him. He deleted the message, but its weight lingered, heavier than the bead in his pocket. Scout lifted his head from the rug and gave a low whine, as if sensing the burden. Maya was in the bathroom again, the second shower running, water cascading hard enough to mask anything else. The house trembled with the storm of routine. Eli walked the hall, slow steps creaking floorboards that had known his weight for decades. Mira's door was open a crack. Her lamp still on though it was late. She looked up from her notebook, eyes wide with worry. "Another message?" she asked quietly. Eli nodded. She hugged the notebook to her chest. "She deletes things, you know. I've seen her. Like she's scared someone will find out." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe she's scared of you." The words cut. He almost barked back. Almost defended himself. But the look in her eyes stopped him. Not accusation, but sadness. He swallowed. "I don't want her to be scared of me. I just need the truth." Mira nodded, almost relieved he didn't shout. Scout padded closer, resting his muzzle against Eli's thigh, the weight of loyalty grounding him. When the shower finally stopped, Eli braced himself. Maya emerged in her robe, steam rolling behind her. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Long day," she murmured, moving past him. He caught the scent again. Too strong, hibiscus filling the air like a cover. He wanted to ask, to force the question, but the moment slipped. She kissed his cheek lightly, already turning toward bed. Later, in the darkness of their room, Eli lay awake, listening to the soft buzz of her phone when a notification arrived. She turned it face down on the nightstand, pretending not to notice. He stared at the ceiling until dawn painted faint gray across the blinds. The next day he drove to Chuck again. They sat on the porch with the smell of cut grass heavy in the air. "It's getting worse," Eli said. "Texts, the showers, the secrecy. I feel like a fool in my own house." Chuck rubbed his jaw. "Listen, patterns tell the truth. Look close enough and the lie will wear thin." "And if I don't like the truth?" Eli asked. Chuck's eyes were steady. "Then you decide if you're a man who wants peace more than answers. Either way, you can't keep pacing like a caged dog. Do something." That evening, Eli did. He came home early, pretending he'd forgotten a tool. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of water, though Maya wasn't due home for another half hour. He walked upstairs, heart hammering. The bathroom door was closed, steam curling at its edges. He pressed his ear to the wood. He didn't hear water now, he heard something else. A rhythm, muffled, broken by sudden pauses. Scout whimpered. Eli's hand closed on the knob. But before he could turn it, the sound stopped. Silence slammed down, heavy and suspicious. A moment later, the toilet flushed, water running as if to cover tracks. The door opened, and Maya stepped out, startled to see him. "You're home early," she said quickly, pulling her robe tighter. Eli studied her face, searching for cracks. "Thought I'd check the storm shutters before dark," he lied. They stood in silence, tension thick as rope. Then she walked past, bare feet leaving damp prints on the carpet. That night, he couldn't hold back. "Maya," he said in the quiet of their room. "What's happening with you?" She stiffened. "What do you mean?" "The showers. The phone. The secrets. You're not here with me even when you're sitting beside me." Her jaw tightened. "You're imagining things." He shook his head. "Don't do that. Don't turn me into the crazy one. If there's someone else, just tell me." Her eyes flashed with hurt and anger. "Someone else? You think I'm sneaking another man into our bathroom? In this house? With Mira here? Is that what you think of me?" His breath came heavy. I don't know what to think anymore. All I know is my wife disappears every night, and I don't know who I'm lying next to. She turned away, her shoulders trembling. You don't understand, she whispered. Then help me, he pleaded. Make me understand. But she said nothing more. She lay down with her back to him, and after a long while her breathing evened into sleep while his stayed jagged. The following night, he resolved to see for himself. He sat in the hallway chair, Scout at his feet, Mira pretending to sleep but listening from her room. When Maya slipped into the bathroom with her phone, he waited. Minutes passed. Water running. Then, he heard a faint laugh, high and false. Followed by the flicker of sound from a video clip. His heart clenched. He stood, moved to the door. His hand was on the knob when Mira stepped quietly into the hall. Uncle Eli, she whispered, her face pale. Don't. I have to know, he said. She shook her head. She's not cheating. I can tell. It's something else. But if you go in there now, you'll break her. She's like glass right now. The desperation in her voice stopped him. He let go of the knob, fists clenching. The water shut off. Maya emerged, startled to see them both standing there. Her eyes darted from Eli to Mira. What's going on? Eli forced calm. We were just checking the pipes. He hated the lie. Hated how it made him small. Maya brushed past them, retreating quickly to the bedroom. Later, Mira came to Eli as he sat in the dark living room, bead in hand, turning it over and over. She needs help, Mira said softly. Not punishment. If you push her, she'll just hide deeper. Eli looked at the girl, wise beyond her years. He thought of his vows, of the years behind them, of the woman who once laughed freely at his jokes in the early light. He thought of the texts, the secrecy, the ache of betrayal. The conflict tore at him like two horses pulling opposite directions. How do I help someone who won't let me in? He asked. Mira shrugged. Maybe you don't break in. Maybe you wait at the door until she opens it. Scout shifted, resting his head on Eli's knee, eyes steady as though he agreed. Outside, another storm gathered. Eli knew the breaking point was near. Whatever truth lived behind those showers, it would not stay hidden much longer. And when it surfaced, it would change the shape of their home forever. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. The kind of late summer night when the air itself feels restless. Eli sat at the dining table with Scout at his feet, Mira finishing homework nearby. When Maya slipped upstairs for her ritual second shower. He could hear the pipes groan to life, water rushing, the steady thrum that had become the soundtrack of his unease. His phone buzzed on the table. Another message. Same number, same words. She's not alone. He closed his eyes, the weight of those words pressing like a stone on his chest. Mira glanced up, catching his reaction. Again? She asked quietly. He nodded. Stay here, he said, pushing back from the table. He moved upstairs, each step heavier than the last. He reached the bathroom door, Scout trailing close, ears flat. Steam leaked through the crack, carrying hibiscus and vanilla so strong it almost stung. He lifted his hand to the knob, but before he could turn it, the shower cut off. Silence filled the hall. The door opened slowly, and Maya stepped out, wrapped in her robe. Her eyes widened when she saw him waiting. Eli, she said softly. Guarded. Why are you standing here? His voice came rough. Because I can't keep pretending. Because I keep getting messages saying you're not alone. Because every night I lose you behind this door and I don't know who you are when you come out. She froze, knuckles whitening on the edge of her robe. For a long beat she said nothing. Then her shoulders sagged, and her face crumpled. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. She brushed past him, down the hall to their bedroom. Eli followed, heart pounding. Mira watched from the stairs, eyes wide, notebook clutched to her chest. Inside the bedroom, Maya sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. Eli closed the door softly, Scout lying across the threshold like a sentinel. Tell me, Eli said. I need the truth. Maya's eyes filled with tears. It's not another man, she said. It's me. It's something broken inside me I've carried since I was a teenager. At boarding school, I found things, videos, magazines, and I couldn't stop. I thought marriage, love, faith would cure it. But the shame only grew. At night it takes over, and I hide in that bathroom so you won't see. The phone. It's not messages from anyone. It's things I shouldn't watch. Eli's chest hollowed out. He had braced himself for betrayal, for a stranger's name, for proof that love had rotted. But this was different, darker. Tangled with pain he hadn't imagined. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice breaking. Because you'd look at me the way you're looking now, she said, tears spilling. Because you'd think I was dirty, weak. Because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you if you knew. He sat heavily beside her, struggling to take in the scope of it. He thought of the bead, of the secrecy, of the way shame had turned their house into a cage. He thought of the vows spoken decades ago, words about better or worse, sickness and health. Before he could speak, a knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps. Both of them startled. Eli rose, went to the front of the house. Mira trailed behind, worry etched on her face. A man stood at the porch, tall, wearing a security jacket with the Neighborhood Association logo. He held a clipboard. "Mr. Brooks?" he asked. "We've had reports of suspicious network activity in this area. Some cameras compromised. We're checking with residents." Eli's stomach dropped. He thought of the messages, the paranoia, the whispers of being watched. "You mean hacked?" he asked. The man nodded. "Yes, sir. Some residents' private feeds may have been accessed. If you've noticed anything strange, we'd advise a check." Maya appeared behind Eli, pale as paper. Her hand clutched the frame. Eli turned to her, realization dawning. "That's why you've been so scared," he said. Maya's eyes filled again, and she nodded, voice shaking. "I thought someone had seen me. That's why I kept scrubbing, hiding. I thought if I washed it away, it wouldn't exist anymore." Eli felt the ground shift beneath him. The texts, the fear. Not another man, but a shadow made of shame and exposure. "So whoever's sending these messages," he said slowly, "they know." The security officer frowned. "Sir?" Eli waved it off. "Nothing. Thanks." He closed the door, leaning against it, breath heavy. Mira stood a few feet away, holding out her phone. "Uncle Eli," she said quietly. "There's something else." On the screen was a screenshot of a message Maya had sent her weeks ago. "Don't keep the video. Delete it. I don't trust my phone anymore." Eli looked at Maya, who covered her face with both hands. "I couldn't tell you," she whispered. "I didn't want you to see me like that. I didn't want anyone to." He went to her, kneeling so their eyes met. "Maya," he said, voice steady now. "The enemy isn't another man. It's shame. And it's been living in this house too long." She sobbed into his shoulder, words spilling broken. "I don't know how to stop." He held her, feeling the years between them tighten and strain but not snap. Behind them, Scout padded over, laying his head on her knee, as if to remind her she was still part of the pack. Mira stood silently, the weight of secrets heavier than any notebook could carry. Outside, thunder rumbled again. But it was distant this time. The real storm was in the room, 2 people facing it together at last. Eli whispered into her hair, more promise than solution. "We'll find a way. But no more hiding. Not from me. Not from yourself." And as he said it, he knew the fight ahead would be harder than anything he'd braced for, but at least now, the truth was on the table. And the door between them had finally opened. The next days passed like walking across thin ice. Each step uncertain, but necessary. The confession had cracked something open, yet the silence afterward carried its own weight. Eli felt it in the way Maya avoided his eyes, in the way her hands shook when she reached for coffee cups, in the way Scout lay between them at night as though guarding a fragile line. He knew words alone would not heal what shame had hollowed out. On Sunday after church he drove them both to see Angela, the marriage counselor Chuck had once spoken highly of. Angela's office sat on Main Street above the bakery, the smell of fresh bread lingering in the stairwell. She welcomed them with a firm handshake. Her presence calm but unyielding. The kind of woman who had seen storms and knew how to chart a safe harbor. They sat across from her on a couch that seemed too small for the distance between them. Angela looked at them both, then at Eli. "You asked her for the truth. She gave it. Now the question is, what do you do with it?" Eli swallowed. "I don't want to lose her, but I don't want to live in a house of secrets anymore." Maya's voice was hoarse. "I don't know how to stop. It's been with me longer than you, longer than this marriage." Angela nodded. "Shame thrives in silence. You've hidden, you've scrubbed, you've doubled down on rituals. But shame doesn't leave until you drag it into the light and refuse to look away." She gave them tools, simple but sharp. A transparency journal, where each would write what they felt at night, no matter how ugly or small, and read aloud once a week. Shared passwords for devices, to strip secrecy of its power. An open door rule after 10 p.m., no more locked or hidden spaces. Maya flinched, but nodded. "It feels like standing naked in public," she admitted. "But maybe that's what healing requires," Angela said. On the drive home, silence stretched until Eli reached over, his hand resting lightly on hers. She didn't pull away. That night they began the journal. Eli wrote first, his handwriting uneven but his words plain. I am scared of losing you. I am angry at what you've hidden. But I still want to sit at the table with you tomorrow. Maya read, tears slipping down. Her own entry was shorter. I am ashamed. I am afraid you'll stop looking at me as your wife, and only see my weakness. But I don't want to drown in it anymore. Scout lay at their feet as if listening, his steady breathing a counterpoint to their trembling voices. Days rolled forward, each small act of honesty a nail driven into new scaffolding. One evening, Maya walked into the kitchen holding a small glass jar. Inside was the bead, the dull black seed Eli had found that night outside the bathroom. She set it on the counter. This has been with me since high school, she said. It was part of a necklace, something silly I wore when I first discovered things I shouldn't have. I kept one bead after it broke. Like a secret talisman. Like if I held on to it, I could control it. But really, it controlled me. Her hands shook as she twisted the lid shut. I don't need it anymore. Eli watched her, chest tight. She placed the jar on the mantel. Not hidden but in plain view. A relic. Stripped of its power. Scout sniffed at it once. Then curled at her feet. As though approving. That night she didn't take the second shower. Instead, she sat on the porch with him, the Georgia summer heavy around them, cicadas loud in the trees. They talked about ordinary things, the grocery list, Mira's college plans, the neighbor's new fence. The ordinary had never felt so extraordinary. But healing was not linear. Some nights Maya slipped, restless, phone in hand. Once Eli found her in the hall at 2 a.m., tears on her face, whispering that she'd failed again. He didn't scold. He sat with her, repeating what Angela had said. That recovery was not about never stumbling, but about not hiding when you did. He reminded her she wasn't alone anymore. Mira, too, shifted. She stopped hovering with the nervous energy of a secret keeper and began sitting at the dinner table with her notebook closed, smiling more freely. She watched them, cautious but hopeful. As if she could see the scaffolding being built and trusted it might hold. One evening, a new text arrived on Eli's phone. Not from the unknown number, but from Chuck. Camera hacker caught. Some punk kid 2 towns over. Eli stared at the message, relief flooding him, but also rage that so much fear had grown from one intrusion. He showed Maya, who cried deep, shaking sobs that emptied her chest. All this time, she whispered. I thought I was being watched. I thought every mistake was public. He held her close. The world can take pieces of our privacy. But it doesn't get to own our marriage. Not unless we hand it over. Slowly, her breathing steadied against him. Weeks passed. Patterns began to change. The second showers grew fewer, the journals grew longer, the silences less sharp. Eli noticed the way Scout no longer whined at the bathroom door, how he now curled at Maya's side, trusting again. He noticed the way Mira hummed while doing homework, the tension leaving her shoulders. One evening after supper, as dusk settled soft across the yard, Maya turned to him and said, I want to try something new. Instead of hiding at night, maybe we walk together. Around the block. Just us. So they did. They walked under street lamps, past neighbors watering lawns, past kids chasing lightning bugs. No words at first, just footsteps sinking. Then she said, Do you still see me as broken? He squeezed her hand. I see you as fighting. And that's stronger than pretending to be whole. Her eyes filled, but she smiled. Scout trotted ahead, tail high, leading them forward. When they returned, she paused at the mantel, touching the jar with the bead inside. Not my prison anymore, she said. The bead stayed there, visible but powerless, a reminder that shame loses its teeth when faced head-on. That night, for the first time in months, she fell asleep before him, her hand resting on his chest, her breathing calm. Eli lay awake a while, listening to the rhythm, feeling the steadiness return to their house. He thought of Angela's words. Of Chuck's porch wisdom. Of Mira's courage. He thought of how justice was not always a verdict or a gavel, but a man choosing to stay. A woman choosing to confess. A family choosing to rebuild. Outside, the summer storm clouds drifted east, leaving stars clear above the town. For the first time in a long while, Eli believed morning might come without dread. And as Scout sighed at the foot of the bed, Eli whispered into the dark, more to himself than anyone else. We're not done. But we're together. And that's enough to start. The summer waned into September, when nights grew cooler, and the air carried a faint crispness that reminded Eli of beginnings and endings all at once. He sat on the porch one evening, the hum of cicadas softer now, watching the sky turn the color of old embers. Inside, Maya and Mira cleared dishes, their voices drifting through the screen door, ordinary conversation about homework and grocery lists. Ordinary, and yet it felt like a victory. Scout lay at his feet, tail flicking lazily, the way of a dog who finally trusted the air of the house again. The bead still sat in its glass jar on the mantel, untouched, harmless. It had become less an artifact of shame and more a marker of survival, a symbol of what had been dragged into the light. Sometimes Eli caught Maya staring at it, not with fear, but with a quiet strength. One night, a storm rolled in suddenly, lightning flashing across the Georgia sky, thunder chasing close behind. The power cut out, plunging the house into the same amber glow that had begun everything. Eli felt his chest tighten at the memory the night he stood at the bathroom door, hand hovering, Scout whining, Mira clutching her notebook. The night he had almost let fear drive him into breaking what could still be healed. Now he lit candles, steady hands striking matches. Maya joined him in the hall, no robe, no hurried excuses, only herself. "Do you want me to light the rest?" she asked. He nodded, passing her the box. They walked together, setting small flames throughout the house, filling the dark with warmth. When they returned to the porch, rain was coming down hard, misting against the screens. They sat side by side, Scout curling between them. Mira slipped out a few minutes later, blanket around her shoulders. Notebook left behind this time. She sat cross-legged on the swing, listening. They didn't speak for a long while. The sound of the storm did the talking. The rhythm of rain on tin. The occasional crack of thunder. Eli finally said, "Funny how storms used to feel like endings to me. Now they feel like pauses. Like the world reminding us it can stop the show anytime." Maya turned toward him, candlelight flickering across her face. "And yet here we are. Still sitting. Still together." She reached for his hand, a simple gesture. But it carried the weight of months of truth, pain, and rebuilding. Mira smiled faintly at them, pulling her blanket tighter. "You know," she said softly, "at school they talk about justice like it's just laws and rules. But I think it's also what happens when people tell the truth to each other and don't run away." Eli felt his throat tighten. He looked at her, this girl who had carried more than she should have, who had stood in the shadows listening when she should have been free to be a child. "You're right," he said. "Justice isn't always in a courtroom. Sometimes it's telling the truth in your own living room." Maya squeezed his hand. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her hair damp with the storm's humidity. Scout gave a contented sigh, the sound of a guardian at rest. As the storm raged outside, Eli felt something inside him settle. The fear of betrayal, the ache of suspicion, the weight of secrets, all of it had been real. Sharp as broken glass. But so was this. The candlelight, the storm, the warmth of his wife beside him. The steady presence of a girl who had chosen to stay part of their family, the dog curled like a sentinel finally at peace. Later, when the rain eased and the candles burned low, Eli stood and looked out over the yard. Water ran down the driveway in silver ribbons. He thought of his father again, the words about the measure of a man. Tonight he understood them differently. The measure of a man was not how he handled perfection, but how he bore witness to imperfection without turning away. He turned back to the porch. Maya had dozed against the swing, Mira tucked under the blanket, Scout still watchful even in half-sleep. Eli blew out the last candle, letting the smoke curl into the night. "We're still here," he whispered into the dark. And for the first time in a long time, he believed those words were enough. In the weeks that followed, the rhythms of the house shifted. The second showers stopped entirely, not through force but through choice. Maya began volunteering at the library, helping with literacy programs, her evenings filled with something other than hiding. Eli found himself proud again when he spoke of her to neighbors, not because she was flawless, but because she was fighting honestly. Mira filled out college applications, her essays brimming with quiet resilience. One draft she left on the counter for Eli to read said, "I learned that families aren't made of secrets. They're made of people who choose to stay when it's hard. That's what justice looks like in a home." He folded the essay carefully, tucking it into his pocket. A reminder that their struggle had planted seeds he hadn't even seen. And always, Scout shadowed them, his old body slowing, but his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a dog whose pack had survived the storm. On the first clear night of October, Eli and Maya walked around the block together. Neighbors waved, porch lights glowed, the world looked steady again. She slipped her hand into his and asked, "Do you think it will ever feel easy again?" He thought about it, about the bead in the jar, about storms and silence. "I don't know about easy," he said finally. "But I think it can feel honest. And maybe that's better." She smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes, and he knew that was enough. When they came back to the house, Mira was on the porch swing, Scout at her feet, the bead glinting faintly in the jar through the window. Eli paused, looking at it one last time. A piece of the past, a symbol of shame turned harmless by daylight. He didn't need to throw it away. Its power had already gone. That night, as he lay in bed with Maya beside him, her breathing steady and calm, Eli thought of storms again. Some tear roofs apart. Some strip trees bare. But some cleanse the air so thoroughly that when morning comes, the world smells like it's been made new. And as sleep pulled him under, he understood that this was their morning. And for once, he wasn't afraid of what daylight would reveal.